I always thought I would live out my old age surrounded by a loving family. It's funny how life doesn't unfold the way you plan. My name is Thomas Baker. I'm 72 years old, and I live in the house I once built for my grandchildren. I don't have any yet, and now I probably won't have any. At least none that I could show how to properly fish or build a birdhouse. Tampa has always been the perfect city for me. Sunny enough to keep me from getting depressed, but without the debilitating heat that haunts the more southern parts of Florida. I moved here in the mid-90s when I was offered the position of managing editor of the Tampa Daily, a local paper that still meant something back then. Elizabeth, my wife, resisted at first. She didn't want to leave Chicago, where all our friends lived. But eventually she agreed, and we moved Michael, our only son, who was 16 at the time. I still wake up at 6 a.m. every morning, a habit impossible to break after 30 years of newspaper work. I have to make my own coffee in the morning now. Elizabeth died 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed too late. Doctors gave her 6 months, she lasted 8. Stubborn to the end, my Liz. The morning I first saw Emily, I was just returning from a run. A lot of people are surprised when they find out I run at my age, but it's a way for me to stay in shape and keep my mind clear. 5 kilometers every morning, rain or shine, it doesn't matter. The body may age, but I refuse to let my spirit follow suit. Standing on the porch was Michael with a young woman. She was taller than him by a couple of inches, which I learned later especially bothered him when she wore heels. Her blonde hair was gathered into a perfect ponytail. Her smile was like a toothpaste commercial. Her clothes were expensive, but without the flashy display of brand names. A professional look. You can immediately see a man who sells real estate to successful people. Dad, I'd like you to meet Emily Frost. Michael looked a little nervous. Emily, this is my father, Thomas. Mr. Baker, finally. She stepped forward and hugged me like we were old friends. She smelled of expensive perfume, too heavy for a Florida morning. Michael has told me so much about you. I pulled back a little, trying to hide my surprise at the pressure. I hope it's not all bad, I smiled. And please, call me Thomas. Michael works as a legal consultant for a large corporation. He was always a smart boy, but he lacked that core strength that allows a person to follow his own path. At school, he changed his hobbies depending on who he was friends with. At university, he chose law because I once carelessly said it was a prestigious profession. He is successful in his field, but I always knew his real passion was music, which he abandoned as soon as he encountered his first difficulties. We made our way into the house and I offered to make breakfast. Oh, don't worry, Thomas, Emily cooed. I brought croissants from the French bakery on Bay Street. They say they are the best in town. She pulled out a paper bag and placed it on the kitchen table as if she'd brought treasure. I prefer scrambled eggs in the morning, especially after a run, but thanks for your concern, I said, pulling out a skillet. Something flashed in her eyes, irritation, but she instantly restored her radiant smile. Of course, you must be hungry after your workout. I'm surprised you're keeping so active. How old are you, I beg your pardon? 72, but I feel like I'm 60. I cracked the eggs into the skillet. Michael, you want some? My son cast a nervous glance at Emily before answering. No, we already had breakfast. I wish you had warned me about the visit. I would have been ready, I remarked, stirring the eggs. Some. It was a spontaneous idea, Emily said before Michael could answer. I'd heard so much about you that I just couldn't wait to officially meet you, especially since we have news. She looked meaningfully at Michael, who brightened and took her hand. We're engaged, Dad. I froze with a spatula in my hand. Michael had never mentioned that their relationship was that serious. In fact, he barely talked about her despite the fact that they'd been dating for how long? 6 months? Congratulations. I tried to make my voice sound sincere. It's, unexpected. When did you decide? Last night. Michael looked like he'd won the lottery. I proposed at the Edgewater rooftop restaurant, and she said yes. Emily showed off the ring, a solid diamond in a platinum setting. I could almost physically feel my son's account empty. It's beautiful, I said, going back to making breakfast. When's the wedding? In 3 months, Emily answered. I know it's soon, but why wait when you know you found your soulmate? I transferred the scrambled eggs to a plate and sat down at the table. 3 months isn't a lot of time to prepare for a wedding. Oh, don't worry, Emily said with a wave of her hand. I do this professionally. I mean, not weddings, of course, but organization in general. A good real estate agent should be able to manage complex projects. Emily is the best in her agency, Michael added proudly. Last year, she sold the most homes in the premium segment. I nodded, sending a bite of scrambled egg into my mouth. And where do you plan to live after the wedding? They looked at each other, and I caught something in that look that I didn't like. Actually, Dad, Michael began, we were thinking of staying in Tampa. Emily has been offered a partnership at the agency, and it's a great opportunity for her. I see, I continued to eat. Are you planning to transfer to the local office of your company? I've already applied for a transfer. Michael looked pleased. They don't mind, given my experience. And where will you live? I asked the question directly, even though I had already guessed the answer. Emily stepped forward, her eyes lighting up. We've been looking at options, but we haven't found anything suitable yet. The market is so competitive right now. Especially for young families, Michael added. The prices are crazy. I wiped my mouth with my napkin, looking at them carefully. If you're referring to my house, I'd like to hear it straight. There was an awkward pause. Michael started to mumble something, but Emily put her hand on his shoulder, as if calming a petulant child. Thomas, we would never suggest that you leave your own home. Her voice was honeyed. But Michael mentioned that you've sometimes thought about moving into something more compact, that this house was too big for one person. I'd actually said something like that once when Elizabeth had just died, and the empty rooms echoed with my footsteps. But a lot has changed since then. I've adapted, turned one of the bedrooms into a study, started writing my memoirs. This house was full of memories, and I wasn't about to give them up. I'm afraid my plans have changed, I said calmly. I like this house, and I don't plan to move. Michael looked disappointed but nodded. Emily, on the other hand, her smile became a little less genuine, her eyes cold for a second. If I hadn't been watching her closely, I might have missed the change. Of course we understand, she said, but there was a faint note of irritation in her voice. This is your home, and we respect your decision. Don't we, honey? Michael hastily agreed, and the conversation turned to the details of the upcoming wedding. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I just failed some kind of test. After breakfast, Emily asked me to show her around the house. I gave her the standard tour, trying to ignore the way she judged each room as if considering what to keep and what to throw away. When we reached the master bedroom, she made a casual remark. What a spacious room, and so much potential for redesign. Those heavy curtains make it look so old, don't you think? Elizabeth chose the curtains. Dark blue with a subtle pattern of silver threads. They reminded her of the night sky. I like them, I said briefly. In the living room, she lingered by the fireplace, looking at the pictures on the mantelpiece. Oh, this must be Elizabeth. She picked up the frame of our wedding photo. Michael looks so much like her. Yes, he inherited her eyes and smile. I carefully picked up the photo and returned it to its place. It's such a tragedy to see her go so early. Emily sighed. How old was she? 67, I answered. Not that early statistically. Emily looked at me with an expression I couldn't accurately interpret, a mixture of surprise and something else. Appreciation? And you've been together for 45 years. She shook her head with feigned admiration. That's so rare now. Such devotion. It must be hard to get used to being alone at your age, huh? Before I could answer, Michael called out from the kitchen. Emily, we have to go if we're going to make it to the florist. Coming, darling, she said, then lowered her voice and added to me, You know, Thomas, you need to socialize more. I could introduce you to my colleague's mother. She's about your age and she's also a widow, a very energetic woman. Thank you for your concern, but I'm not looking for acquaintances, I replied as I headed for the exit. As I walked them out, I noticed Emily stopping by the garage, scrutinizing my car, not new, but a well-maintained Tesla Model S. What a beautiful car, she said. It's beautiful, she said. That model is already a rarity. Do you drive a lot? Every day, I replied. I'm not going to give up on public transportation yet. I have an excellent memory. I deliberately named several articles from yesterday's paper to confirm my words. Emily laughed. Oh, I'm sure you do. It's probably just a coincidence. You know, my grandmother was also very energetic right up until the end. She kept saying she was 80 even though she was well past 90. I gritted my teeth. This was the third or fourth veiled reference to my age and possible incapacity in the last half hour. When they finally left, I went back inside and poured myself a whiskey. It was only 11 in the morning, but meeting my future daughter-in-law required something strong. I sat down in the chair that had once been Elizabeth's favorite seat and thought. Something about Emily Frost made me intuitively distrustful. It wasn't just her attempts to gently hint at my supposed infirmity or the way she appraised my house, as if she already considered it her own. There was something else, some falseness in her perfect facade that I couldn't pinpoint, but felt on a level of instinct honed by years of working with people. For the past 3 years, I had lived a quiet life, immersed in my own thoughts and memories. Perhaps it was time to start paying attention to the world around me again, especially to the woman who was about to become the wife of my only son. Over the next 2 weeks, I saw my son only once, and that was in passing. Michael ran into the house to pick up some paperwork while Emily waited for him in the car with the engine running. Citing an urgent meeting with the wedding planner, he refused even a cup of coffee. We used to call at least twice a week. Now I almost always went to voicemail. The return messages were short, as if written on the run. Sorry, busy. I'll tell you when I meet you. I'll call you back later. And never called back. One evening I did get him on the phone. How are things going with the wedding preparations? I asked him after a casual exchange of pleasantries. Everything's fine, he said with an unusual tension in his voice. Emily had practically organized everything. That's great. When are you planning the pre-wedding dinner? I could make a reservation at the Bristol Harbor. You know, the chef there is an old friend of mine. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Actually, Dad, Emily's already made the arrangements. At La Marais. They have a new chef from France. I see. I tried to hide my disappointment. When's that going to happen? Another pause. Next Friday. I was just about to call you. Okay, I'll clear the evening. I heard a voice in the background. A woman's, insistent. Dad, listen. Michael spoke even quieter. There won't be many people there. Mostly Emily's friends and her parents. They're flying in from Boston, by the way. I'd like to meet them. Sure, but, you see, the restaurant's really small and seating is limited. I slowly realized what they were trying to tell me. Michael, are you inviting me to the pre-wedding dinner or not? Of course I am. He was talking too fast. It's just that we thought, maybe you'd be bored. All the guests are much younger. Emily's worried that I'll look like an old man among the young people. I felt anger building up inside, but I tried to stay calm. No, it's not that. It's just... He hesitated again. The restaurant is on the seafront. There are a lot of steps, and it might be hard for you. I run 5 kilometers every morning, Michael, I hissed. I think I can handle the stairs somehow. I know, Dad. I'm sorry. Sure, come, he sighed. I'll send you a formal invitation. Don't bother, I tried to lighten the mood. Just tell me what time to be there and what to wear. After that conversation, I decided to pay Michael a surprise visit. I knew where he lived, in a luxury apartment complex near the center, overlooking the bay. He'd been renting the apartment for over a year. The guard at the entrance knew me and let me in without calling. Emily opened the door when I knocked. Her face reflected a range of emotions: surprise, annoyance, and finally a strained smile. Thomas, what a surprise! She stepped back to let me in. Michael didn't say you were coming in. This is a spontaneous visit, I smiled. I hope I'm not intruding. The apartment had changed since my last visit. Michael's sports trophies were gone, his vinyl record collection was out of sight, and abstract paintings in pastel colors were on the walls. Are you renovating? I asked, looking around. Just a little update. Emily walked into the kitchen. Would you like some tea? Michael will be here soon. He ran to the store for groceries. I'd love some. I sat down at the kitchen table. How are the wedding preparations going? Just fine, she put the kettle on. I found the perfect place for the ceremony, the Oaks River Country Club. It's got an amazing view of the bay. Wasn't that where the board's financial fraud scandal happened last year? I smiled innocently. Emily froze for a moment, then shrugged. That was a long time ago, and there's new management there now. The place is too beautiful to pay attention to such trivialities. Run, I see. Still a strange choice for someone who works in real estate. Reputation is an important thing. She gave me a sharp look, but then smiled again. Your concern for the family's reputation is touching, Thomas. Michael said you were always sensitive about such matters. Our conversation was interrupted by Michael's arrival. He seemed surprised and a little alarmed to see me. Dad, what are you doing here? Amma, I thought I'd stop by and see how you were doing. I stood up to hug my son. It's been a while. Yeah, I'm sorry. The last few weeks have been crazy. He put the bags on the kitchen table. We were just about to have dinner. Are you staying? Before I could answer, Emily stepped in. Oh, honey, I forgot to tell you. We got a call from the catering company. They want to discuss the menu for the wedding tonight. I called back and made an appointment for 8 o'clock. Michael frowned. Didn't we reschedule it for tomorrow? No, it was an appointment with the florist. She stroked his shoulder affectionately. You're just confused. There's so much to remember. Probably, Michael looked uncertain, but quickly pulled himself together. I'm sorry, Dad, but we have to go. Why don't we have dinner together this weekend? I nodded, realizing exactly what had happened. It was a thinly veiled excuse. No catering company makes appointments for 8 o'clock at night, and especially on a Friday. But I decided not to expose the lie. Sure, son. Call me when you're free. As I left, I heard Emily reprimanding Michael. You should have warned me he was coming. I didn't even have time to clean up. I didn't hear my son's response, but Emily's tone made it clear that she wasn't happy. A week later, we had a pre-wedding dinner at Lamara. I showed up exactly at the appointed time, dressed in my best suit. The restaurant was indeed on a hill overlooking the bay, and there was a rather steep staircase leading up to it. I made it up without the slightest difficulty, mentally chuckling at Emily's ridiculous fears. There was a small group of about 20 people inside. I immediately noticed Michael talking to an older couple, obviously Emily's parents. She herself was standing nearby, resplendent in an elegant blue dress. As I got closer, I heard a snippet of their conversation. Iraim, and that's when I realized I had to take matters into my own hands, Emily was saying. Poor Michael is so worried about his father, but he won't talk to him about it. You know, pride and all that. Older people can be so stubborn. Her mother, a frail woman with carefully styled gray hair, nodded with a sympathetic expression. It's so hard to watch your parents grow old and refuse to acknowledge their limitations. Michael told me that his father sometimes forgets the simplest things, Emily continued in a conspiratorial tone. Recently, he couldn't remember where he'd left his car in the supermarket parking lot. They had to call security to help him find it. I froze in place. This had never happened before. Nothing even remotely similar. I felt the blood rush to my face with anger and humiliation. Michael stood next to me and didn't say a word. Didn't refute the brazen lie. Good evening, I said as I approached the group. Everyone turned around. Something akin to panic flashed across Emily's face, but she pulled herself together. Thomas, we're so glad you're here. I'd like you to meet my parents, Richard and Patricia Frost. Her father, a sturdy man about my age with a military bearing, shook my hand. Nice to meet you. Emily's told me a lot about you. I'm sure she has. I smiled, looking directly at my future daughter-in-law. I hope not all the stories were made up. There was an awkward pause. What Dad means is that Emily's probably embellishing, Michael interjected. She likes to dramatize things. That's right, Emily laughed, but her eyes remained cold. I have a great imagination, don't I, darling? Dinner passed in a tense atmosphere. I was the only guest from Michael's side. Everyone else was Emily's friend or relative. She masterfully controlled the conversation, interrupting me every time I tried to say something about Michael or our family, as if she was afraid I might spoil the image she was creating. By dessert, I noticed that many of the guests were looking at me with ill-concealed pity. One of Emily's friends, a young woman with an overly loud laugh, even offered to walk me to a cab to make sure I didn't get lost. Thank you for your concern, but I remember exactly where I parked my car, I replied with icy politeness. When the evening was finally over, I took Michael aside. We need to talk. Alone. He glanced nervously at Emily, who was saying goodbye to the guests. Now's not a good time, Dad. How about tomorrow? Okay, I'll stop by your office during lunch. The next day, I called my old colleague, David Hicks. We'd worked together for over 20 years, and after his retirement, he'd started a small detective agency specializing in corporate investigations. "Thomas, you old bugger? How many years, how many winters?" His husky voice, the result of 50 years of smoking, sounded surprisingly chipper for 8 in the morning. "David, I need your help." I didn't beat around the bush. "Can you check on one person for me?" "Emily Frost, a real estate agent who works at Premier Homes." "Is it something serious?" David's tone turned businesslike. "She's going to be my daughter-in-law, and I have reason to believe she's not who she says she is." "I see," he said quietly. "Give me a couple days. I'll call you when I find something." At noon, I arrived at Michael's office, located in one of the glass skyscrapers of the business center. The receptionist at the front desk recognized me and let me in without calling. Michael was sitting at his desk, immersed in studying some documents. He looked tired, with shadows under his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. "Dad?" He looked up when I walked in. "What are you doing here?" "We agreed to talk, remember?" I sat down in the chair across from him. "Do you have time for lunch?" He looked at his watch and nodded. 20 minutes. "What's so urgent?" "Emily," I decided not to beat around the bush. "Son, she's spreading lies about me. Yesterday, I heard her telling her parents about an incident that never happened, that I lost my car in the parking lot and couldn't find it." Michael turned pale. "Dad, she's just worried about you. Maybe she misunderstood something." "Misunderstood?" I raised my voice, then forced myself to calm down. "Sonro, Michael, that was an outright lie. And you stood there and didn't say a word." "Emily's being a little dramatic, I admit." He rubbed his face with his hands. "But she's doing it with the best of intentions. She's really worried about you living alone in such a big house. What if you fall or get sick?" "I'm 72 years old, not 92, I cut him off. "I'm in great shape. I don't have any health problems, and I'm doing just fine on my own. The question is, why is your fiancée spreading false stories about me? Why would she do that?" Michael looked away. "You're exaggerating, Dad. Emily just wants you to be taken care of." "Taken care of? Or controlled?" I stepped forward. "Son, listen to me. Ever since she showed up, you've stopped coming to see me. You barely call me. I was only invited to the pre-wedding dinner after I asked her directly. She's systematically cutting you off from me." "That's not true." Michael shook his head, but there was no confidence in his voice. "We're just busy with wedding preparations. And then, you've never been much for family events. I always came to your school plays. I've been to every one of your basketball games. I sat in the front row when you got your law degree." I felt the pain building in my chest. "When have I missed a single important event in your life?" Michael remained silent, staring at the table. "I'm asking you to just think about it," I continued more gently. "Observe what's going on. The way Emily talks about me to other people when she thinks I can't hear." "She loves me," Michael looked up. "Oh, and she wants you to be a part of our lives. You just haven't gotten to know each other properly yet." "I hope you're right," I stood up. "But I also hope you don't turn a blind eye to the obvious. You've always been a smart boy, Michael. Don't let anyone, not even the one you love, think for you." I walked away feeling that the conversation had not accomplished its purpose. Michael was too enamored with Emily to see the truth. 3 days later, David called me. "I found something interesting about your future daughter-in-law," he said without preamble. "She wasn't always Emily Frost." "What do you mean?" I tensed. "She was Emily Clark until she was 25. Then she changed her last name to her mother's maiden name, Frost. Around the same time, she moved from Chicago to Boston. An interesting coincidence. It happened right after a major scandal with the real estate agency where she worked. The Chicago Times wrote about it. An elderly client accused the agency of fraud, claimed that he was persuaded to sell the house at an undervalued price and then resold it for a huge profit." Was Emily involved? Her name didn't appear in the articles, but she quit the agency a week before the scandal broke. And another detail, this older client was the father of her then fiancé. I felt a chill run down my spine. Had she been engaged before? "Twice," David answered, "and both times it didn't go through with the wedding. The first fiancé broke off the engagement after the story with his father. The second, a wealthy businessman from Boston, twice her age, died of a heart attack a month before the wedding. He left her a decent inheritance, which allowed her to move to Florida and start fresh. What a coincidence, I murmured. Exactly, David sounded professionally wary. I can't say it has anything to do with the man's death. It was officially an accident. But it's a strange story, you have to admit. Anything else? She lied about her education. Her resume on the agency's website says she graduated from Boston University Business School. I checked, and there's no record of that. But it does say she took a 6-month real estate course in Florida. Also, she owes a lot of money to the bank. Not exactly the most glowing credit history. I thanked David and promised to keep him informed. After the conversation, I sat in my chair for a long time, staring at nothing. Emily wasn't just a liar and manipulator, she was dangerous. And my son was completely at her mercy. After my conversation with David, I'd spent a sleepless night going over everything I'd learned about Emily Frost, or Emily Clark, as her name really was. With each passing hour, my concern for Michael grew. He'd always been a smart guy, but in his relationships with women, he'd sometimes displayed the naivete he'd inherited from his mother. Elizabeth, too, preferred to see the best in people, even when the facts said otherwise. I called Michael in the morning, but as usual, it went to voicemail. I left a message saying I wanted to talk to him about something important. By noon, there was no answer. I decided to stop by his house after work, but by the time I got to his apartment, no one was home. The next few days passed in unsuccessful attempts to contact my son. He would drop my calls or respond with short messages saying he was very busy. Final wedding preparations, Dad. Talk to you later. It was obvious that Emily was doing everything she could to keep us from meeting. Finally, a week before the wedding, Michael called back on his own. Hi, Dad, he said quickly, like he was in a hurry. I'm sorry I've been away. These days have been crazy. I understand, son, I replied, trying to sound calm. But we really need to talk. It's important. If this is about Emily again. Yes, it's about Emily. There are things you need to know. Long pause. I could almost hear the gears turning in Michael's head as he weighed his options. Okay, he finally said. Let's meet, but not today or tomorrow. I've got every minute scheduled. How about Thursday? I'll have a couple hours between meetings. Thursday was only 3 days before the wedding, but it's better than nothing. It's a deal. In your office? What time? Blue Harbor. It's near my work. 2 o'clock. Okay, I'll be there. The conversation left an unpleasant residue. It was obvious that Michael was not eager to meet and listen to what I was about to tell him. On Wednesday night, the night before our meeting, I decided to stop by Michael's house unannounced. It was an old-fashioned move, but I wanted to catch Emily off guard, perhaps talk to her without my son present. In the parking lot outside their house, I spotted Michael's car, but parked a little farther away so they wouldn't see me from the windows. As I approached the driveway, I ran into their neighbor, a young woman with a small poodle on a leash. Good evening, I said hello. Do you know if Michael Baker is home? Oh, you must be his father, she smiled. He and Emily had just left. I think they were going to the restaurant, but if you have to wait, there are couches in the lobby. I thanked her and decided to wait a while. Maybe they wouldn't be back too late, but time passed and Michael and Emily were still gone. It was starting to get dark when I saw a cab pull up to the house. Michael stepped out of it, alone and staggering a little. Apparently, the evening had included alcohol. I quickly stepped back into the shadows, not ready for a confrontation with my son in such a state. A few minutes later, another cab pulled up. Emily stepped out of it, looking completely sober. She stopped at the entrance, pulled out her cell phone, and looked around and started dialing. I was standing close enough to hear her conversation. Hi, Jess. Emily's voice sounded different than usual. No more sugary notes. No more sharp, business-like intonation. Yeah, I just got back from that stupid dinner. Michael was drunk as usual. He was barely on his feet when we left, so I sent him home in a separate cab. Give me a break from his whining for a while. A pause while she listened for an answer. Yeah, his dad called again. He wants to meet him tomorrow. I'm sure he suspects something. There's a reason he was the editor-in-chief of the paper. He has a nose for trouble. There was another pause. I listened intensely. Of course I looked after Michael. Told him it would be the last time that he needed to pack. Pretended to care about his father. You know all that nonsense. She laughed, and it was a cold, calculating laugh. The best wedding present we could have gotten is if that old man would just disappear from our lives. Seriously, Jess. He sticks his nose in everywhere. But we only have a few more days to be patient, and then we'll be officially married and I can finally take care of the house. I was out of breath. I froze, afraid to move and make my presence known. Yes, Michael promised that the house would be our wedding gift from his father. The old man living alone in a huge mansion on the beach just doesn't make sense. Michael and I have already discussed how to rearrange the rooms and what to do with the garden. Another pause. Of course, I took care of it, convinced Michael that his father would be much better off in a nursing home where he would be cared for. It's dangerous to live alone at his age, she laughed again, especially since I've told everyone I know how he loses his memory and forgets basic things. A couple months of training like this, and no one will be surprised when we register him at Sunny Hills. They say they take good care of old people there. I felt a cold rage come over me. Emily's plan was becoming clearer and clearer. Marry Michael, take over my house, and then get rid of her unwanted father-in-law by putting him in a nursing home. Typical scheme for a predator like her. Okay, Jess, I gotta go. I gotta go see if Michael threw up on our new carpet. I'll see you at rehearsal on Friday. And remember, don't tell anyone about our plans. Emily put the phone away and walked into the entryway. I was left standing in the dark, digesting what I had heard. There was no doubt in my mind now. This woman was purposefully destroying my relationship with my son, scheming behind our backs, and had very specific plans for my property and future. I spent the rest of the evening thinking, what could I do? Just tell Michael about the conversation I'd overheard? He probably wouldn't believe me. Emily would easily dismiss it by saying I'd made it up out of jealousy or senile dementia, since she'd already carefully prepared the ground by spreading rumors about my supposedly deteriorating memory. The next day, Thursday, I arrived at the Blue Harbor 15 minutes early. Michael was 20 minutes late, and he looked like he hadn't slept well. Sorry I'm late, he mumbled, sitting down across from me. I had a work emergency. It's okay, I tried to smile. How are you feeling? You look tired. I'm fine, he tapped his fingers impatiently on the table. Look, Dad, I don't have much time. I have to be across town in an hour. What did you want to talk about? About Emily. I took a deep breath. Michael, I've hired a man to gather information about her. My son's face petrified. You what? His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You've been following my fiancée? I wasn't following her. No, Dad, this is too much, he clenched his fists. I knew you didn't approve of our marriage, but I didn't think you'd stoop to this. Michael, listen to me. She's not who she says she is. Her real name is Clark, and she changed it after the scandal in Chicago. She was engaged twice before you, and it ended badly both times. She told me about her past relationships, Michael interrupted, and about changing her last name too. It was her mother's last name, and she'd taken it after her parents died to honor their memory. I shook my head. That's a lie, Michael. Her parents are alive. You met them yourself. So phoned into him. They're foster parents, he countered. Her real parents died in a car accident when she was 16. I realized that Emily had thought of everything in detail. She had a convincing cover story for every fact. What about her education? Did she tell you she graduated from Boston University? Yes, she has a business degree. Michael frowned. Why the questions? 'Cause that's a lie, too. She didn't go to school there. How would you know? He began to raise his voice, attracting the attention of the neighboring tables. Did you check her diplomas? Did you call the university? My guy did. There's no record of her schooling. Your person, Michael grimaced. Some private detective you hired to spy on my future wife. That's disgusting, Dad. I can't believe you would do that. I realized the conversation was going the wrong way, so I decided to change tactics. Okay, let's forget about it. Tell me this. Have you and Emily talked about your plans after the wedding? Where are you going to live? Michael visibly tensed. We're still discussing options. And among those options is my house? There was a long pause. Michael averted his eyes. We've thought about it, yes. There's too much space for you alone, and it's expensive to keep the house. We could help you. Did Emily tell you that I already promised the house to you as a wedding present? What? No, of course not. But the blush on Michael's face betrayed his lie. Did she also tell you that she was planning to put me in a nursing home? To Sunny Hills, to be exact? Michael turned pale. Where did you... He paused. That's not true. We were just discussing options for where you'd be more comfortable living if Emily and I took over the house. She's worried about you. She's worried about my house, Michael, not me. I leaned closer. Yesterday, I heard her on the phone with her friend Jess. She was saying that the best wedding present would be if I disappeared from your life. You were eavesdropping on her private conversations? Michael jumped up. This is getting paranoid, Dad. I'm not listening to this. Sit down, I raised my voice too. Sit down and listen to the rest of this. To my surprise, Michael complied, though his face was a mixture of anger and disgust. Michael, I know you love her, but I've seen how she manipulates you, how she alienates you from me, how she spreads lies about my supposed dementia. She's a predator, son, and you're not her first victim. I'm leaving, Michael stood up again, and I don't want to see you at the wedding. If you can't support me on the happiest day of my life, you'd better not come at all. With those words, he turned and walked quickly out of the restaurant, leaving me alone at the table. I sat there for a long time, staring out the window and thinking about what had just happened. I had lost my son, at least for the moment. Emily had won this round, but the battle wasn't over yet. Back home, I called my attorney, Gregory Parker. We'd been friends since my days at the newspaper, and I trusted him completely. Greg, I need your help, I said as soon as he picked up the phone. I want to sell the house, as soon as possible. Thomas? He sounded surprised. Are you sure? You always said you'd never sell this house, that it was a legacy for Michael. Circumstances have changed, I told him briefly about Emily's situation. I understand, Greg replied after a pause, but selling the house is a big step. Maybe there are other ways to solve the problem. I've tried to talk to Michael. He can't hear me. He's too blinded by it. And you think selling the house is going to fix anything? No, I answered honestly. But at least Emily won't get what she came for. I won't let her use my son and take what I've spent a lifetime building. Greg sighed. Okay, I'll help you with the paperwork. But it'll take time, you know. How long? Normally 2 or 3 weeks. But if you're willing to lower the price, we can find a buyer sooner. Money's not a problem, I said. I just need to close the deal by Sunday. Sunday? Greg whistled. No one. That's Michael's wedding day, isn't it? That's right, I confirmed. I have my own wedding present for the newlyweds. The next 2 days passed in feverish activity. Greg found a buyer, a couple from New York, who had been looking for a house by the sea in our neighborhood for a long time. They were willing to pay even more than I was asking, just to close the deal quickly. Friday night, we signed all the documents, and I received a check for a very substantial amount. On Saturday, the day before the wedding, I rang the doorbell of Michael's apartment. Emily opened the door. When she saw me, she froze for a second, but quickly pulled herself together. Thomas, what a surprise. Michael's not home right now. It's his bachelor party. He won't be back until the morning. I know, I said calmly. I came to talk to you. She hesitated, clearly reluctant to let me in, but finally backed down. Of course. Come in. Would you like some tea? No, thank you. I went into the living room and sat down without waiting for an invitation. I won't be staying long. Emily sat across from me, crossing her legs and folding her hands in her lap. Perfect posture, perfect smile. What can I do for you, Thomas? You can stop pretending, for starters, I said. Michael's gone. We don't need to play these games. Her smile trembled but didn't disappear. I don't know what you mean. I heard your conversation with Jess. I looked straight into her eyes. About how you can't wait to get rid of me. About how the best wedding present would be for me to disappear from your life. Emily froze, her smile finally melting away. You've been eavesdropping on my private conversations? I overheard them by accident. I was waiting for Michael outside your house. Well, she leaned back in her chair, her posture more relaxed, but her eyes remained cold and calculating. So what now? Are you going to tell Michael? He won't believe you. I've taken care of that. I already tried. You're right, he wouldn't believe me, she grinned. Then why are you here? I wanted to talk about the house, I paused. The one you think of as your wedding present. Oh, that, she waved her hand. Look, Thomas, let's be honest. You're 72 years old, living alone in a huge house on the beach. It's unsustainable. You'd be much more comfortable in a place where you'd be taken care of, where you'd have medical personnel for emergencies. Sunny Hills? I clarified. She didn't even look embarrassed. It's a good place. I checked it out myself. I'm sure you have. I nodded. And while I live out my days among other old people, you and Michael will enjoy life in my house, the remodeling and the new garden. Look, Emily stepped forward, her voice mellifluous. I know we got off on the wrong foot, but I really love your son. And I want you to be a part of our family, I really do. Just at a certain distance. For everyone's sake. For your good, you mean? I stood up. I've come to tell you that the best gift for your wedding will indeed be my disappearance from your life. It's just like you wanted. Her face brightened. You understand. That's wonderful, Thomas. I knew you were a reasonable man at heart. I haven't finished. I pulled an envelope from my pocket and placed it on the table between us. It's my wedding present to you. Open it. Emily grabbed the envelope impatiently, her eyes glittering greedily. She expected to see the deed to the house, I was sure. Instead, she found pictures inside, the very ones David had collected about her past. Her face changed, the color draining from her cheeks. What are these? She whispered. Documentation of your past, I answered calmly. Your old fiancée, the scandal in Chicago, the name change, everything you were so careful to keep from Michael. And by the way, I sold the house. Yesterday, the papers are signed, the money's in, so a real estate wedding present is out of the question. Emily jumped up, her face contorted with rage. You had no right. This house was supposed to be ours. Michael promised me. Michael couldn't promise anything because the house was mine. I stood up too. And now it belongs to a family from New York. Very nice people, by the way. She clenched her fists. It doesn't change anything. I'm still going to marry Michael. We'll find another house. Maybe, I agreed, if the wedding goes ahead. Copies of these documents will be delivered to Michael tomorrow morning, a couple hours before the ceremony. He won't believe it, but she didn't sound so sure. He loves me. He does, I nodded. And that's why he's going to be in a lot of pain. But better pain now than years of suffering with someone like you. I headed for the door. Emily followed me, her voice trembling with restrained rage. You'll regret this, Thomas. I swear you will. I turned around in the doorway. I already regret a lot of things in my life, Emily. A lot of decisions I've made or not made. But I will never regret this one. I walked out, closing the door behind me, and headed for the elevator. Behind me, I heard Emily shout curses and then the sound of shattering glass. Apparently, she'd thrown something at the wall. I didn't turn around. I had a lot of things to do to prepare the final part of my plan, a special wedding gift that was going to shock not only Emily, but my son as well. Michael and Emily's wedding day was clear and sunny, as if nature itself was blessing their union. The ceremony was to begin at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Oaks River Country Club, and the gala dinner was planned for the evening. I attended neither. Instead, I spent the morning in a small cafe on the other side of town, leisurely sipping coffee and reading the latest newspaper. Trying to take my mind off what was going on at the country club, I read the same article for the third time, not really paying much attention to the content. My phone came to life around noon. David had called. The courier delivered the envelope, he said without preamble. Left it at the door like you asked. Visibly enough. Tied a red ribbon to the doorknob. Thank you, I replied. Are you sure it won't blow away? Don't worry, I took care of it. The envelope was securely fastened, and the weather was perfect, no wind, no rain. After that, the phone rang constantly. First Gregory, my lawyer, then Robert, an old friend and colleague whom I'd warned I wouldn't be at my son's wedding. It's a mess around here, Robert informed me. Everyone's looking for you. Emily is furious, although she tries to hide it. She told the guests that you weren't feeling well and couldn't come. But Michael looks puzzled and upset. Did you give him my message? Yes, he said you called me this morning and apologized for not being able to attend, but didn't explain the reason. He asked if you told me where you were, but I said I didn't know. Okay, I was quiet for a moment. And how was he? Honest? He looks like someone who just got some disturbing news, but he's trying to keep a straight face. I can't tell if it's because of your absence or something else, By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I parked on a quiet street a block away from my, now former, home. The weather was still impeccable, but my heart was scratching. I tried to convince myself that I'd done the right thing, that I'd saved my son from a manipulative predator, but the doubt still gnawed at me. What if I was wrong? What if Emily really loves Michael? What if I ruined my own son's happiness because of my suspicion? But then I remembered Emily's cold, calculating voice when she talked to her friend, her greedy gaze when it came to my house, and her plans to send me to Sunny Hills. No, I wasn't wrong. As much as it hurt, Michael needed to know the truth. At 4:30, my phone rang again. Michael's number popped up on the screen. I didn't answer it. A minute later, a message came through. "Dad, where are you? Why didn't you come? Is everything okay?" I didn't answer that either. The newlyweds were scheduled to arrive at the house around 6 in the evening, a surprise party organized by Emily. Michael didn't know that she had planned to spend their wedding night at my house, symbolically taking possession of it. At least it had been her plan before I sold the house. I parked in a spot that gave me a good view of the driveway to the house, but I was hard to see. I had to wait longer than I expected. Apparently, the ceremony was taking longer than I expected. Finally, at the beginning of the 8th, when the sun was already slipping toward the horizon, coloring the bay in golden tones, the wedding limousine pulled up. Michael and Emily stepped out of it, both dressed in festive attire, he in a classic black tuxedo, she in an elegant white dress with a long train, which she was careful not to get dirty. They looked like the perfect couple from a magazine cover. Young, beautiful, happy. For a moment, I was overcome with doubt again. Emily was saying something excitedly to Michael, pointing toward the house. Even from a distance, you could see her face brighten. Michael looked puzzled but smiled, charmed by his wife's enthusiasm. She pulled a key out of her small purse, obviously a duplicate of the one I had once given Michael, and held it out to her husband with a solemn look. They walked up the steps to the front door. Michael put the key in the lock and turned it. Nothing happened. He tried again, then again, but the door wouldn't budge. I mentally thanked the new owners, who had changed the locks immediately, as I had requested. Emily looked confused. She said something to Michael, gesturing vigorously. He shrugged and tried unsuccessfully once more to open the door. Then Emily noticed an envelope tied to the doorknob. She tugged at the red ribbon, freeing it, and eagerly tore open the package. Even from this distance, I could see the expression on her face change as she looked through the contents of the envelope. First bewilderment, then shock, then barely contained rage. Michael stood nearby, trying to peer over her shoulder. Finally, he took the documents from her hands and began to look through them himself. I knew what he was looking at. The certificate of sale to the new owners, signed and certified, a detailed dossier on Emily Clark, including information about her past engagements, her history with the scandal in Chicago, pictures of her and her previous fiancé, one of whom looked just like Michael, dark-haired, tall, with thin-rimmed glasses. And the last most important part was a printout of bank transactions showing how, after the death of her second fiancé, Emily had received a substantial amount of money, which she had quickly transferred to several different accounts and then consolidated into a new account under the name Emily Frost. Michael turned pale, slumped down on the steps, and covered his face with his hands. Emily paced in front of him, arguing furiously. I could see her arms flailing, her face contorted with anger. Then she snatched the papers from him, tore them apart, and threw them to the ground. The wind picked up the scraps and blew them along the street. That didn't stop her. Unaware that I had anticipated this reaction and had prepared copies of the documents, Emily continued to argue something to Michael. I watched as she knelt down in front of him, dirtying her snow-white dress, as she took his face in the palms of her hands, forcing him to look at her. She was crying, real or pretend tears, I don't know, and talking. Finally, Michael stood up. His shoulders slumped, he looked utterly devastated. He said something to Emily, short and sharp. She jumped up and grabbed his arm, but he shook off her grip and headed for the limo. Emily ran after him, her plume dragging along the ground, gathering dust and leaves. There was another altercation outside the car. Emily blocked Michael's path, preventing him from getting into the limo. He tried to get around her, but she got in his way again and again. Finally, Michael shouted something in her face. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw her recoil as if she'd been slapped. He took advantage of that to get into the car and slam the door shut. Emily remained standing on the sidewalk as the limo pulled away and drove away. Her shoulders slumped. She stared after the car with an expression I couldn't make out from this distance. Was it shock, grief, anger, or a mixture of all of them? She stood like that for a few minutes, then pulled out her cell phone and called someone. The conversation was brief. Soon a cab pulled up. Emily got in it and drove away, leaving behind a house that never became hers and ruined plans for the future. I stayed where I was for a while longer, thinking about what had happened. It was hard on my soul. I felt no triumph or satisfaction, just fatigue and a vague sense that victory had come at too high a price. Michael looked absolutely shattered. Emily may have been a predator after his money and my possessions, but he loved her, and I had ruined his happiness on what should have been the most joyous day of his life. When it got dark, I drove to the hotel where I had booked a room for a few days. Every now and then I checked my phone, expecting a call from my son, but there was none. Late in the afternoon came a text from Robert. I don't know what happened, but the reception has been canceled. The guests were told that the newlyweds suddenly decided to go on their wedding trip right away. But rumor has it that they had a big fight. Someone saw Michael leaving alone. I didn't answer. What could I say? That I ruined my own son's wedding because I thought his fiancée was a self-serving liar? Even if I was right, even if the documents proved me right, my actions still looked like the act of a vindictive old man, unable to accept that his son was starting his own family. I didn't sleep well that night. The bed seemed too soft. The room was too hot or too cold. I tossed and turned, imagining where Michael was, what he was thinking, how he was feeling. I imagined him sitting in a bar somewhere, drinking whiskey and cursing me, his father for ruining his happiness. Or him driving down a highway at night, blind with rage and grief, unable to see the road. Or how he returned to Emily, believing her excuses and convincing himself that I had slandered her out of jealousy or senile dementia. In the morning, I woke up shattered. After eating breakfast in my room, I decided to call Michael, but it went to voicemail. His phone was off, or he dropped the call when he saw my number. I left a short message. Michael, I'm sorry about what happened. Call me when you're ready to talk. The day dragged on endlessly. I tried to read, watched TV, even went for a short walk along the waterfront, but my thoughts kept returning to my son and the events of yesterday. Around 3 in the afternoon, there was a knock on my room door. I opened it, expecting to see the maid, but Michael stood on the doorstep. He looked awful, pale, unshaven, with eyes red from lack of sleep, in a wrinkled suit, which apparently he had not taken off since yesterday. May I come in? He asked quietly. I stepped back silently, letting him into the room. Michael stepped inside and sank heavily into a chair by the window. I sat across from him, not knowing what to say. You were right about her, he said finally, looking out the window instead of at me. Not about everything, but about a lot of things. She didn't love me, at least not in the way I thought she did. I'm sorry, son. I wanted to add something else, but the word stuck in my throat. How did you know? Michael turned to me. How did you realize she was like that? I told him about my suspicions, about how I'd hired David to check it out, about the conversation I'd overheard between Emily and her friend. Michael listened silently, nodding occasionally. She denied it, he said when I was done. She said you were making it up, that the documents were fake, that you just didn't want me to be happy. But then, he hesitated. Then I asked her directly about David Hicks, asked if she knew the name, and she, changed. It was like the mask fell off. She started screaming that you'd ruined everything, that we would have had a perfect life if it hadn't been for your interference. She didn't even deny that she was planning to put you in a nursing home and take your house. She said it would have been a fair deal. I get a beautiful wife. She gets financial stability and status. And that's when I realized I'd never known the real Emily. There was a heavy silence. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to comfort my son, and another part of me was triumphant that I was right. But neither of those feelings seemed appropriate. Is the house really sold? Michael asked after a long pause. Yeah, I nodded. Friday. The new owners are a family from New York. They have two teenage children. I think they'll like living there. How about you? Where will you live? I haven't decided yet, I admitted. Maybe I'll rent an apartment in the center. Or maybe I'll go somewhere warmer. I've always wanted to live in Arizona. Michael nodded, turning back to the window. I told her I was filing for an annulment. His voice sounded hollow, lifeless. Oh yeah, she screamed, threatened to sue, then cried, begged me to give her another chance. But I could no longer look at her and see the woman I had fallen in love with. Everything was a lie, from the beginning. Not everything, I objected softly. You loved her genuinely, it was real. But based on deception, Michael finally looked me in the eye. Thank you for saving me from her. Even if it hurt now, it was better to know the truth now than years from now, when it would be even harder. I wanted to hug him, but I wasn't sure he'd accept the gesture. We sat in silence, looking at each other across the space that separated us, physical and emotional. She could have gotten everything she wanted, Michael said thoughtfully. If she'd just been more patient, if she hadn't rushed to isolate me from you, if she hadn't started spreading those rumors about your supposed dementia, we could have just waited. He paused, realizing what he was saying. Wait until I die a natural death and leave you the house as an inheritance? I smiled sadly. Yes, that would have been a smarter plan on her part, but she was too greedy and impatient. Michael lowered his head, ashamed. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean it to sound like that. It's okay. I finally stood up and put my hand on his shoulder. I know you didn't want me dead. You were just blinded by love. I should have seen the signs, Michael shook his head. I should have seen how she was manipulating me, how she was distancing me from you. I just didn't want to see it. We often don't see what's right in front of us if we don't want to see it, I said philosophically. You're not the first to be fooled by good looks and sweet talk. Michael nodded, smiling weakly. And you won't be the last, will you? Unfortunately, I squeezed his shoulder. Are you staying the night? There's a couch here, not very comfortable, but it'll do for one night. If you don't mind. He looked so exhausted, so young at that moment, almost like the boy who used to come to me with his problems and troubles, seeking comfort and advice. Of course I don't mind, I smiled. You can always stay with me, son. Always. We spent that evening together, ordering room service and talking, at first tensely, awkwardly, then more and more freely. Michael told me about work, about his plans, about how he'd met Emily and how quickly things had spiraled. I told him about my last years at the newspaper before I retired, about the book I'd wanted to write for a long time but kept putting off. We talked into the night, for the first time in years, really talking, not just exchanging polite phrases. Before I went to bed, Michael asked, what would have happened if I hadn't believed those documents? If I had gone back to Emily, believing her version? I thought long and hard about the answer. I don't know, son. Maybe I would have been forced to accept your choice and step aside. Or maybe I would have continued to fight, to look for new evidence. But at the end of the day, it's your life, and you decide who you spend it with. Even if that decision is wrong, especially then, I smiled sadly. Sometimes we have to take our own bumps in the road to learn something. Michael nodded, thoughtful, and then said goodnight to me and settled back on the couch. I lay in bed listening to my son breathing in the next room and thought about how strangely life had turned out. I had lost the home I loved, but I might have reestablished a relationship with my son. Was it an equal replacement? I don't know, but I felt I had done the right thing in protecting Michael from a woman who saw him only as a means to her ends. In the morning, we had breakfast together in a small cafe near the hotel. Michael was in a better mood than the day before, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He even smiled as he told about a funny incident at work. Have you decided what you're going to do next? I asked him as we finished our coffee. Sorry, no, he shook his head. Maybe I'll take a vacation, go somewhere, clear my head. What about you? I was thinking about visiting some old friends in Boston, I said, and then maybe look for a new house, something smaller but with a view of the water. I used to fall asleep to the sound of the waves. Michael nodded, and for a moment there was awkwardness between us again, a reminder of the house he'd thought of as his future inheritance. but which I'd sold so Emily wouldn't have it. You know, he said finally, maybe I'll join you in Boston. I could use a change of scenery. I smiled, feeling my heart grow warm. I'd love the company, son. We paid and went outside. The day was clear and sunny, with a light breeze off the bay. Michael looked at his watch and sighed. I've got to go. I need to stop by the apartment and pack up my things while Emily's gone. She was going to stay with a friend, Jess. Be careful, I warned. People like her don't give up easily. She might try to manipulate you, make you change your mind. Don't worry, Michael looked me firmly in the eye. I won't fall for her tricks again. What I saw last night, it's unforgivable and unforgivable. We said goodbye, agreeing to meet in a couple of days when he'd taken care of his most urgent business. I watched Michael walk to his car, tall, straight, shoulders squared. Not at all like the broken man who had come to see me yesterday. He turned around at the car and waved at me. I waved back, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, hope, and vague anxiety. Life had taken an unexpected turn, and I didn't know where this new road would lead. But I was ready to walk it, step by step, day by day, rebuilding what I had almost lost and building something new on the ruins of the old. After the events of the wedding day, life changed abruptly for all of us. I decided not to stay in Tampa. Too many memories, too many acquaintances who asked uncomfortable questions about Michael's wedding and my absence from it. Plus, after selling my house, I didn't have a permanent place to live. A week after the failed wedding, I packed up my belongings, which were stored in a rented storage unit, and moved to St. Petersburg, a small town across the bay. Not far enough away to completely sever ties with the past, but far enough to start a new chapter of life. I rented a cozy apartment 2 blocks from the waterfront, not as spacious as my old home, but comfortable enough for one person. High ceilings, large windows overlooking the bay, and a small balcony where I could sip coffee in the mornings while watching the seagulls and yachts. The first few days in the new place were filled with hassle. I had to unpack, furnish the apartment, get used to new routes and stores. I immersed myself in these worries, trying not to think about Michael and what had happened. But thoughts of my son still haunted me. He'd called only once since we'd met at the hotel, dryly informing me that he'd packed up his apartment and was staying temporarily at a friend's house. He sounded distant, as if he were speaking from a prepared script. He answered my questions with one-word answers, and then he said he had to go and quickly said goodbye. I felt the wall growing between us again. I learned from my old friend Robert that the scandal at Michael's wedding was the talk of the town. There were different versions. Some claimed that Michael caught the bride with another man right on the day of the wedding, others that I showed up at the reception and made a scene, others that it was all about some will and inheritance. As is usually the case with gossip, none of the versions were close to the truth. Emily told everyone that you are against their marriage because of your senile whims, Robert reported on the phone. That you supposedly don't want Michael to be happy because then he'll pay less attention to you. She's playing the role of the unhappy daughter-in-law who was robbed of her happiness by her evil father-in-law on her wedding day. And Michael? I asked, clutching the receiver. What's he saying? Nothing. He doesn't appear in public. They say he took a leave of absence from work and left town. Emily gives the impression that they're still together, that they're trying to work things out, but I've heard from mutual acquaintances that he's filed for an annulment. I breathed a sigh of relief. So Michael hadn't gone back to her, hadn't believed her lies. That was good news, but I still ached at the thought of my son and I having our relationship jeopardized again. A month passed. I was slowly getting used to the new place and the new rhythm of life. I still went jogging in the mornings, but now my route was along the pier and the waterfront. In the evenings, I often sat in the little cafe on the corner, reading a book or just watching the passers-by. That's where I met Henry Wilcox, a gray-haired man about my age, a former naval officer. He often sat at a neighboring table, and one day we got to talking about the weather, then books, and then discovered a shared interest in World War II history. My father served in the Pacific, Henry said. He fought on the aircraft carrier Enterprise. He never talked about it after the war, but he left his diaries. I read them after he died. Amazing stories. We began to meet regularly in cafes discussing books, politics, life. Henry was also a widower. his wife having died 5 years ago of cancer. He had 2 grown children and 4 grandchildren who lived in other states and came only for the holidays. Loneliness is a strange thing, he once said. At first it feels like the end of everything. Then you realize it's just another way of being. Not better or worse, just different. Through Henry, I met other people, mostly retired people like me, who met twice a week at the local club to play chess and bridge. I was never a big fan of card games, but bridge proved to be fascinating, requiring strategic thinking and a good memory. At the end of my second month in St. Petersburg, I got a call from Michael. I had just gotten back from a run and was about to take a shower when the phone rang. "Dad?" My son's voice sounded unsure. "It's me. Michael." I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart racing. "How are you?" "I'm fine." I paused. "I heard you moved." "Yeah, I got an apartment in St. Petersburg. It's quiet, peaceful." "I see." Another pause. "Why didn't you tell me?" His tone was accusatory, and I felt my irritation rising. "Would you have answered if I'd called?" "After our last conversation, I got the impression that you weren't particularly interested in communicating." "I was in shock, Dad," Michael snapped. "My wedding had just fallen apart. My fiancée wasn't the person I thought she was. And you expect me to make small talk?" "No, of course not." I tried to speak more calmly. "I realize you needed time. It just seemed like you were angry with me for interfering." "I was," Michael admitted. "Part of me still is. You ruined my wedding, sold the house I grew up in without even consulting me, and you moved to another town without telling me. I did what I thought was right." I closed my eyes. "Emily was using you, Michael. She wanted to get the house and put me in a nursing home. You know that yourself?" "Yes, I do." Michael's voice softened. "But the way you could have talked to me earlier, shown me the evidence privately, instead of putting on this performance on your wedding day." "I tried," I reminded him. "You wouldn't listen. You were so infatuated with her that you brushed off every attempt I made to tell you the truth. I did what I had to do to protect you." There was silence on the line. I could only hear Michael's breathing and the distant noise of cars on his end of the wire. "Are you still in Tampa?" I finally asked. "Yeah, back at work. Got a new apartment." "What about—" I hesitated, not wanting to say her name. "Emily," Michael snorted. "Oh, she'd shown her true colors as soon as she realized she wasn't getting the house or the money. Threatened to sue, wanted to claim some of my savings as marital property. But the marriage was so short, she didn't stand a chance. When that didn't work, she started spreading rumors about me, about you, about our family, telling everyone that I was crazy, that I had anger control issues, that I kept it from her until we were married. I'm sorry, son." "Don't be." There was bitterness in his voice. "Now help me see what kind of person she really is. You remember Lisa Connors? She worked with me in the legal department. Well, Emily tried to turn her against me, talking trash. But Lisa came straight to me and told me everything. Said she always thought Emily was a phony, but she didn't want to get involved." "Lisa was always a smart girl," I remarked. I remembered her, a serious young woman with a penetrating gaze and a sharp mind. "Yes," Michael's voice was warm. "We talk more often after all this. She was very supportive." I smiled, realizing from his tone that something more than friendship might be brewing between them, but I didn't comment. It was too soon. "So what now?" I asked. "Have you forgiven me for interfering?" "I'm working on it," Michael answered honestly. "Part of me is grateful to you for saving me from a terrible mistake. The other part still resents the way you did it. But I realize you didn't have a choice. I was blind and deaf to all the warnings." "We all have moments of weakness," I said softly. "The important thing is that you finally saw the truth." "Yes," he agreed. "Look, Dad, I thought I'd come visit you this weekend, see how you're settling in, if that's okay with you." I felt a lump come up in my throat. Of course it's okay. I'd be delighted. We agreed on the details of the visit, and I hung up the phone feeling like a heavy stone had been lifted from my soul. Things weren't quite right between us yet, but the first step had been taken. That evening, I told Henry about Michael's call. We were sitting on the patio of a small restaurant by the water, watching the sunset. "That's a good sign," he said, sipping his whiskey. "It means he's ready to move on." "I hope so." I looked up at the pinking sky. I was so afraid I was going to lose him forever with this Emily thing. Children are stronger than we realize. Henry shook the glass thoughtfully, watching the amber liquid shimmer in the setting sun. My eldest didn't speak to me for 3 years after I didn't approve of his marriage, but he eventually came back. Once his wife eloped with a fitness trainer, grabbing half of their joint savings. Over the following weeks, my life took on a new meaning. I began writing my memoir, a project I'd been putting off for years. I joined a local jazz club and discovered new names and tunes. I even enrolled in a pottery class, much to Henry's surprise and amusement. Pottery at 72, he laughed. What's next? Tango? Why not? I parried. It's never too late to learn something new. Emily made several more attempts to contact Michael and me, threatening to sue and demanding compensation, but gradually her attacks became less frequent. Michael said she left Tampa. Apparently her reputation was too tarnished to continue working at the same agency. When Michael arrived over the weekend, I could see a change in him. He seemed calmer, more confident, as if he had taken a heavy weight off his shoulders. He talked a lot about Lisa not directly confessing his feelings, but I could see the warmth in his eyes when he said her name. We spent the weekend walking along the waterfront, talking about everything in the world, enjoying each other's company in a way we hadn't done in years. There was a new sincerity to our relationship, as if Emily's deception and the ensuing crisis had washed away the patina of formality that had been building up between us for years. In the evenings, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, looking out over the bay and listening to the seagulls. I thought about the house I'd sold, the life I'd left behind, the decisions I'd made. Was there bitterness in them? Yes, sometimes there was, but there was also relief and a strange sense of freedom, freedom from the past, from expectations, from the weight of memories. For the first time in many years, I felt that I was really living in the present, not just existing, clinging to the past. And this feeling was surprisingly fresh, invigorating, full of possibilities. The year went by surprisingly quickly. It seems like only yesterday I was moving to St. Petersburg, and already I'm celebrating my first anniversary in my new apartment. In that time, I had settled in, developed habits, and even traditions, such as playing bridge with Henry and his friends on Saturday nights, and visiting the local art gallery on Sundays, where the exhibitions were constantly being updated. My life took on new meaning and substance. I began writing a memoir of my work at the newspaper, not for publication, more for myself and perhaps for Michael if he ever became interested. I had mastered pottery and now boasted a collection of handmade, albeit not perfect, cups and vases. I also got a dog, an old golden retriever named Buddy from the local shelter. His previous owners had moved to a nursing home, and the dog was without a home. We found each other, two lonely creatures starting life with a clean slate. Strangely, I rarely thought of my former home. Sometimes in the mornings, half asleep, I'd think I was still there, and for a moment a sense of loss would envelop me. But then Buddy would poke his cold nose into my hand, demanding breakfast and a walk, and the obsession would dissipate. The new reality was no worse than the old one, just different. Michael and I kept in touch. We called once a week. Sometimes he came up for the weekend. Our relationship became more even without the former tension, but also without the intimacy that had flashed between us immediately after the scandal of the wedding. It was as if we'd both set invisible boundaries that we didn't dare cross. Michael mentioned Lisa Connors more and more often. They'd started dating a few months after the failed wedding, and it seemed to me that their relationship was getting serious. Lisa was the complete opposite of Emily, reserved, principled, with a subtle sense of humor. I met her twice, and both times I was pleasantly impressed by her intelligence and delicacy. One April day, when the blossoming trees filled the air with sweet fragrance, and the bay sparkled in the rays of the spring sun, I received a call from Michael. "Dad," his voice sounded excited, "the court order just came in. My marriage to Emily is officially annulled." "Congratulations, son," I was genuinely happy. It was high time to close this chapter. "Yes, the process was delayed by her constant appeals and demands for compensation," Michael sighed with relief. "But the judge finally ruled in my favor. Her claim for moral damages was dismissed, and her claim for property division was dismissed as well. She won't get a dime." "And deservedly so," I said. "What's she going to do now?" "I don't know, and I don't want to know," Michael said firmly. "According to the latest rumors, she'd moved to California. Hopefully, she'll find a more gullible victim there. We didn't talk for a moment. I sensed that Michael wanted to say something else. Dad, he finally said, I've been thinking. Maybe we could celebrate together. I could come down this weekend, or you could come visit me in Tampa. We haven't spent time together in a while. He sounded so hopeful, it made me uncomfortable. Michael was clearly looking for a closer relationship than the one we'd developed over the past year. He wanted to return to the intimacy of before, or even create a new, deeper connection, but I wasn't sure I was ready for that. Over that year, I'd learned to value my independence, my personal space. I'd gotten used to making decisions without looking at my son's opinion, without thinking about his approval. And I wasn't sure I wanted to let someone so close to my heart again, even my own child. You know, Michael, I began gently, this isn't a good time. I have a fishing trip planned with Henry. Maybe next month? Sure, he sounded disappointed, trying to hide the disappointment in his voice. No problem. Just let me know when you're free. After the conversation, I sat on the balcony for a long time, looking out at the bay and thinking about the complexity of family relationships. I love Michael. Of course I did. He was my only son, a part of me and Elizabeth. But love doesn't always mean intimacy. Sometimes loving means keeping a distance, giving each other space to grow and define themselves. Maybe after everything that had happened with Emily, I was just afraid of being deceived again, even by my own son. Or maybe this year of solitude had taught me to value independence more than family ties. Either way, I felt that I wasn't yet ready for the kind of rapprochement Michael wanted. 2 weeks after that phone call, I encountered an unexpected visitor. Returning from a morning walk with Buddy, I saw a familiar figure in the driveway. Michael was sitting on a bench, nervously fumbling with an envelope. Michael? I was surprised. What are you doing here? He jumped up when he saw me, and an uncertain smile lit up his face. Hi, Dad. I'm sorry to call you unannounced. I tried to call you, but you weren't picking up. I left my phone at home, I explained, pointing to the leash. Buddy and I were out for a walk. Buddy wagged his tail when he heard his name and ran up to Michael, demanding attention. He leaned over to pet the dog, and that gave me a few seconds to collect my thoughts. Come on in, I nodded at the door. Have you had breakfast? Michael looked tense in the apartment, as if he didn't know where to put his hands. He sat on the edge of the couch, still clutching his envelope. Coffee, I offered, heading for the kitchen. Yeah, thanks, he followed me. Dad, I came here to talk. About us. About what's been going on between us for the last year. I concentrated on making coffee without looking at my son. What's going on? You're distant, Michael said bluntly. Every time I ask you to meet, you find reasons to say no. When I call, the conversations are short and perfunctory. You keep me at a distance, and I don't understand why. I sighed, pouring coffee into cups. It's hard to explain, Michael. Try, his voice sounded almost pleading. I have a right to know what's going on. Are you mad at me because I didn't believe you about Emily in the first place? No, it's not that. I sat down at the table and gestured for him to do the same. It's about me. It's about how my life has changed this year. Yeah, I've gotten used to being alone, Michael. I've learned to appreciate freedom and independence, and I'm not sure I want to go back to the way things were before. What old relationship? He frowned. Dad, we were never really close. There was always some distance, some reticence. I thought after the Emily story we'd finally be able to get closer, but instead you've gone even farther away. There was a truth in his words that I couldn't deny. Michael and I had never been as close as I would have liked. First because of my job, which took up most of my time, then because of his desire for independence, then because of Emily. There were always reasons why we couldn't really get to know each other. Maybe it's too late to make a change, I said quietly. Some wounds don't heal, Michael. And some relationships can't be repaired, no matter how hard we try. That's not true, he stepped forward. It's never too late to start over. Look at you. At 73, you've started a new life, learned pottery, got a dog. What makes you think we can't start over in our relationship? I looked at him, my son, so much like his mother with his eyes and stubborn chin. There was such sincere hope in his gaze that it hurt. I'm afraid, Michael, I finally admitted. I'm afraid that there will be pain and disappointment again, that someone would come between us again, That I'll see the mistrust and judgment in your eyes again? That won't happen, he said confidently. I've learned a lot this year, and I've learned that family is the most important thing we have. Not houses, not things, not money. The people who are there for us no matter what. He handed me the envelope he'd been holding all this time. Here, I want to show you this. Inside were pictures, old faded pictures that had once hung in my office at the house in Tampa. Me and Michael on a fishing trip when he was about 10 years old. The three of us with Elizabeth on a picnic by the lake. Michael is getting his college degree, and I'm standing next to him, putting my hand on his shoulder. I kept them, Michael says. When you sold the house, the new owners let me take some of my personal belongings. I picked out these pictures. I flipped through them in silence, and each one seemed to open a door to the past, to moments I'd almost forgotten or had purposely pushed out of my memory. We had a good past, Dad, Michael said softly. It wasn't perfect, with its ups and downs, but it was ours. And I'd like us to have a good future too. How much time do we have left together? 5 years? 10? 20, if we're lucky? I don't want to waste it on alienation and distance. I looked at the pictures and felt something change inside me, as if the ice I'd been building up around my heart all this year was beginning to melt. I'm not asking you to go back to Tampa, Michael continued. I'm not asking you to give up your new life or your new friends. Let's not be strangers, okay? Let's see each other more often, talk more, get to know each other. He was quiet for a moment and added with a slight smile, by the way, I wanted to introduce you to Lisa. A real introduction, not just a fleeting encounter. She really wants to get to know you better. I looked up from the photos and met my son's gaze. Open, sincere, full of hope. And I realized I couldn't deny him that request. I couldn't keep him at a distance when he was so clearly trying to bridge the gap between us. All right, I nodded. Let's give it a try. The evening after Michael left, I sat on the balcony for a long time, thinking about our conversation and the choices I'd made. Buddy dozed at my feet, occasionally stirring in his sleep. Somewhere in the distance, a lone sailboat was sailing across the bay, its white silhouette distinct against the sunset sky. I thought about life, about its unexpected turns and lessons, about how sometimes you have to let go of even the closest people to keep yourself safe, and how sometimes you have to find the courage to let them back into your life, risking new pain. Each of us has our own path, and each of us has to walk it on our own, with our own mistakes and discoveries. But maybe at some parts of that path it is possible to walk side by side, supporting each other, not merging completely, but not distancing ourselves to the point of complete loneliness either. Perhaps that is the wisdom of finding the balance between intimacy and independence, between family ties and personal freedom. I didn't know if Michael and I could find that balance, but I was willing to try. For him, for myself, for the memory of Elizabeth, who had always believed in the power of family. The sun disappeared over the horizon, coloring the sky in deep shades of purple and indigo. Another day was coming to an end. Another chapter was closing, opening the way to new pages of life.